Last week, I was catching up with a friend at a pretty high-end lounge in the city. And he's the kind of guy who, 10 years ago would have been the ultimate catch.
Right. Successful, looks like he lives at the gym.
Oh, totally. More time there than I spend at my desk, for sure.
Yeah.
So naturally, I ask him, how's the dating life?
The standard question.
Exactly. I'm expecting some story about a new romance or, at least the usual complaints about the grind of the apps.
Of course.
But instead, he leans back, takes a slow sip of his drink, and gives me this calm, almost pitying smile.
Oh, that's not the reaction you expect.
Not at all. He says, I deleted them all 6 months ago. And he didn't sound bitter or lonely. He sounded relieved.
Like he'd escaped something.
Exactly. Like someone who just walked out of a casino after finally realizing the house always wins. Then he pulls out his phone. But instead of Hinge or Tinder, he shows me this chat interface, an AI companion he'd been talking to for weeks. And he told me it wasn't about a lack of options. It was about the market price. And then he said something that it really stuck with me.
What was that?
He said, in the real world, I'm expected to provide a 5-star experience for a 1-star return. With this, he taps his phone, the ROI is finally in my favor.
Return on investment. He's talking about human connection, like a stock portfolio.
And it was so cold and calculated, but he wasn't joking. This wasn't some loser who couldn't get a date. This was a high-value participant who decided the product wasn't worth the investment anymore.
And that shift, that's what we're here to talk about.
That exact shift. From frustrated pursuit to this quiet, logical withdrawal. It's happening on a global scale. We are witnessing a mass forfeiture of the digital dating market.
Where men aren't just failing to find partners, they're actively choosing to bankrupt the system by walking away.
And when the average man finds more consistent validation in a synthetic spouse than in a real-world relationship, we aren't just looking at a trend.
No, we're looking at a full-blown market collapse.
So why is the digital coliseum of dating suddenly standing empty at dusk? And what happens to a civilization when its men decide the social contract is a liability they can no longer afford to sign?
That opening story, it perfectly encapsulates the entire thesis, doesn't it? This isn't about personal failure or bitterness.
No, the calculation.
It's a cold, rational calculation against a zero-sum system, and we have to frame this not as an emotional reaction, but as a systemic, quantified market failure. It's all about efficiency.
Yeah, the sources we looked into for this deep dive, they're pretty unanimous on this point.
Completely. They all describe the digital dating market as, well, basically a deregulated free market.
Yeah.
And the consequences of that are brutal for most of the people in it.
It really does sound like a libertarian economist's dream. But instead of stocks and bonds, we're trading in, human attention.
Yeah.
Emotional energy.
Exactly. And like any deregulated market, it seems to have run straight into a catastrophic failure driven by extreme inequality.
You used a powerful phrase there, a catastrophic loss of liquidity. What does that actually mean in human terms?
Well, if you think of the core commodity as romantic attention, the algorithms on these apps are designed to hyper-concentrate that attention.
Right. They funnel it somewhere.
They funnel it toward a very, very small, perceived top tier of profiles. They're not optimized to get you a successful match. They're optimized for engagement to keep you on the app.
So for most people, the market just seizes up.
It freezes. There's no effective way to interact or transact because all the available attention, the liquidity, is locked up at the very top. The system is designed to keep you swiping, not to get you off the app and into a relationship.
It does that by showing you these unattainable ideals while making most regular people just invisible.
Precisely.
And it's so easy to feel this anecdotally. You spend hours on an app, you get no results, you know the game is rigged. But can we actually... Can we quantify this level of inequality?
We can. And this is where the analysis gets chillingly precise.
Because the data we found is truly shocking, especially when we apply this one concept from economics, the sexual Gini coefficient.
That's the one. For anyone who isn't familiar, the Gini coefficient is the standard measure of economic inequality in a country.
Right, like income distribution.
Exactly. A Gini co 0 means perfect equality. Everyone has the same income. A Gini of 1 means one person owns everything. Applying that to the distribution of likes on a dating app, well, that's what validates that feeling of systemic collapse.
So what was the number? What did researchers calculate for one of these major dating economies based on like percentages?
The calculation came out to a Gini coefficient of 0.58.
0.58. Let's pause on that number for a second. To put that in perspective for you, this isn't just high, it's extreme.
It's off the charts.
A Gini coefficient of 0.58 means that this digital dating economy has more inequality than 95.1% of all the world's national economies.
Let that sink in. The market you log into on your phone is fundamentally less equitable than the wealth distribution system in almost every single country on Earth.
We're talking about a system that is running hotter and more unfairly than places that are famous for their massive income gaps.
Precisely. If you saw a real-world economy with a Gini around 0.58, you'd be looking at a highly unstable developing nation, probably dealing with, massive corruption or deep structural problems.
So when the average person opens a dating app, they're stepping into an economy that is structurally designed for them to fail. It has the stability of a casino during a currency collapse.
That's a perfect analogy.
And we can even break this down by gender, can't we? Which clarifies who actually holds the power in this market. The platform's own data confirms it.
It does. For heterosexual females, the calculated Gini was around 0.324.
Okay, so 0.324, what does that compare to?
Well, that's typical of a standard, developed Western European nation. There's some inequality, sure, but it's generally stable. The market is functional. It's not overly punishing.
But for men, it's a completely different story.
A completely different world. Yes.
Yeah.
Heterosexual males face a Gini coefficient of 0.542.
0.542. That's the number that really represents this market failure, isn't it?
That's the whole story right there. That level of inequality is comparable to a historical kleptocracy, where all the wealth is siphoned off by a tiny elite. It's a perpetually unstable economy where almost no one sees a return.
So if you're a guy and you feel like you are just perpetually ignored on these apps, this 0.542 number is the math that confirms that feeling. It's not in your head.
It's the architecture of the system.
And this quantitative failure is reinforced by another economic principle we found in the research, the classic 80-20 rule, the Pareto distribution.
Studies that looked at the Tinder economy found the 80-20 rule at work with almost shocking precision.
How so?
The data showed that the bottom 80% of men, those rated lowest in attractiveness, are all competing for the attention of the bottom 22% of women.
The market is completely upside down for them. 80% of the men are fighting over less than a quarter of the women.
While at the same time, the top 78% of women are all competing for the attention of the top 20% of men.
Which creates this massive scarcity bottleneck at the top tier of male attractiveness.
Exactly, and it simultaneously renders the vast majority of men completely invisible. Their profiles are either never seen or they're just instantly dismissed.
So if you're an average guy, you are, by the numbers, mathematically invisible to almost 80% of the women on the platform.
And the sheer volume disparity in how people use the like button confirms that selectivity.
This data point was staggering.
It is. Studies found that women liked a mere 4.5% of the men they saw.
4.5%.
That is hyperselectivity in action. Men, on the other hand, liked 61.9% of the women they encountered.
Wow. That's just a mind-blowing difference. Women are exercising intense scarcity, and men are basically casting a net over almost everything they see.
It means that for any random interaction, the male is likely to like the female 6.2 times more often than the other way around. This doesn't just happen by chance.
No, it proves definitively that women are the absolute selectors in this domain.
Just as the underlying principles of sexual selection always suggested, technology has just given them the ability to apply that selectivity at a global scale instantly.
Which brings us to the OCCUPID data point.
Right.
This feels like the subjective cherry on top of this statistical sundae. It just drives home the reality behind the numbers.
It really does. OCCUPID analyzed their massive data set, and it provided this really stark assessment of how men are perceived visually in the digital space.
What do they find?
They found that women collectively rate 80% of men as worse looking than medium.
80%.
Yes. 4 out of every 5 men on the platform are deemed below average by the aggregate opinion of female users.
That is just a brutal self-esteem hit. And if 80% of men are rated below average, they're not just facing tough odds, they're facing mathematical dismissal.
And that's what the data showed. When those men sent messages, they received replies only about 30% of the time, or even less.
How did it compare to how men rated women?
Men rated women as worse looking than medium only about 50% of the time. So men are far less critical of the general pool. The conclusion is just inescapable.
The majority of women find the majority of men unattractive and not worth engaging with.
And the app's interface doesn't just facilitate this preference, it actively reinforces it and broadcasts it globally.
So what happens when people, specifically the 80% of men operating in that 0.542 Gini economy, realize the system is mathematically rigged against them?
They do the only rational thing. They walk away.
Which is what we're seeing, the Gen Z exodus and market forfeiture. And this isn't just a theory, right? We can see it in corporate reports.
Oh, absolutely. We're seeing tangible evidence in the stagnated growth and earnings reports from Match Group. That's the big one, the company that owns Tinder, Hinge, Cupid.
And while their growth is flatlining, what's happening on the other side?
You see the exponential meteoric rise of generative AI platforms that offer emotional engagement. The market capital, the attention, it's all shifting.
And the individual stories, they really give that cold data a human face. I keep thinking about that young man, Jiho. His withdrawal was just this quiet act of financial and emotional self-preservation.
His experience is the textbook definition of the Gini coefficient in action. He wasn't just casually swiping, you know.
No, he was invested heavily.
For 3 years, he spent nearly 10% of his modest salary on premium features, boosts, super likes, read receipts, all of it. He was trying to buy his way out of the bottom 80%.
He was trying to pay the toll to get into a broken casino.
Exactly. And the data he tracked himself was just devastating. Over 2,000 swipes, he got 3 matches.
And 0 replies that actually led to anything.
0. The psychological tax of realizing that your purchasing power as an average man has effectively hit 0 in this market.
Yeah.
It's immense.
It's not just rejection at that point. It's being rendered completely obsolete by an algorithm.
And so his withdrawal, like your friend's, wasn't out of anger or bitterness. It was a cold, rational calculation. The cost of participation time, money, emotional resilience, it just yielded 0 return on investment.
So his decision, Genho's decision, that's the rational economic endpoint.
It is, and the phenomenon that results from millions of people making that same choice is what we're calling a calculated market forfeiture.
People are choosing to bankrupt the system by refusing to supply the attention and participation that fuels it.
They're logging off for good. And that lack of engagement creates a feedback loop that lowers the value proposition for everyone who's left in the digital coliseum.
Okay, so let's unpack this. If the digital market is quantifiably broken and it's driving people out, what are the biological and psychological drivers that are keeping people trying in the first place?
Right.
And maybe more importantly, why is the cost of entry, the standard you have to meet, so astronomically high?
This is where we have to look at how our ancient human instincts are just clashing violently with modern algorithmic efficiency.
It's a mismatch.
A huge one. We're operating with instincts that evolved over millennia in these small tribal groups, and now we're suddenly thrust into a global, hyper-efficient marketplace. That clash inevitably creates what you could call behavioral hyperinflation.
Our Stone Age brains are just overwhelmed by the sudden access to infinite choice.
Exactly.
So let's ground this in the biology. Parental Investment Theory. This seems to be the foundational concept for understanding all of human mate selectivity, doesn't it?
Absolutely essential. Parental Investment Theory, or PIT, it basically posits that the sex that invests more heavily in offspring, biologically, historically, that's the female, will be the more selective sex.
Because a bad choice has a much higher cost for them.
A much higher cost. Gestation, lactation, vulnerability, all of it. So female selectivity is rooted in minimizing that risk, which historically gave them a near monopoly on mate choice.
And this difference in risk, it drives all the observable mating and courtship behaviors we see today, whether we're conscious of them or not.
Completely. For men, the cost of a poor choice is lower, and reproductive success can be increased by maximizing partners. So their courtship behaviors are all aimed at signaling status and resources.
Provider signal.
A provider signal, exactly. Experiments show men who are primed for mating are more likely to spend money on luxury products, drive fancy cars, or do things that signal dominance or heroism. They're shouting to the Stone Age brain, "I am a capable provider, choose me."
And women's strategies are focused on attracting and securing those resources and the commitment to use them for her and her offspring.
Right. Their behaviors are focused on advertising physical attractiveness and youth. Those are the key markers of fertility. And also signaling cooperativeness. So heavy investment in appearance, grooming, clothes.
The two sexes are just hardwired to signal completely different things because they face completely different biological risks.
And you even see this divergence in the dark side of relationships, in what's called mate retention.
Jealousy.
Jealousy. Since men face the risk of investing resources in unrelated offspring cuckoldry, they are consistently shown to be more jealous over sexual infidelity.
Whereas women are more at risk of losing access to the resources and stability.
Which is why they're consistently more jealous over emotional infidelity. It's all a risk assessment based on reproductive cost.
So now, let's overlay those ancient, deeply embedded instincts onto the extremely efficient algorithms of modern dating. This is where we get the algorithmic exacerbation that broke the market.
The old market had natural friction, you see. In the pre-app world, things like proximity, shared social circles, what we might call relationship market value or RMV, that weighed heavily.
Right. If you lived in a small town, you might compromise based on who was actually available and stable and there. You prioritize the relationships function over pure genetics.
But modern apps are efficiency engines. They just erase all that friction.
They do. They're designed for highly efficient preference weighting, and they prioritize sexual market value, SMV, almost exclusively.
They show you the most attractive people first. They feed you people just outside your league to keep you swiping. And they erase the geographical and social constraints that used to force compromise.
Which means the average person, especially in a big city, is suddenly competing against an astronomical number of profiles. A lot of them are professional content creators or, highly curated fakes.
People they would never have encountered in real life.
Never.
And that exponential increase in choice leads directly to the core problem. Irreversible hyperinflation of standards.
Explain that.
An average woman who historically had a limited pool of local options now has access to hundreds, thousands of potential suitors at her fingertips. When you have infinite choice, you only look at the top fraction of a percent.
The bar for just visual aesthetics rises for everyone.
Because the Stone Age brain is being fed a constant stream of curated, digitally filtered, and often unachievable imagery.
This is that profound evolutionary mismatch we keep coming back to. We have Stone Age brains looking for the best genetic fitness, but the digital world is showing us these filtered, optimized, perfect genetic extracts.
And it shifts the goal. It's no longer about finding a cooperative, functional partner. It's about seeking a biologically impossible ideal. Most people simply cannot meet that standard.
And that hyperinflation, it extends beyond just the swipe, doesn't it? For men, the perception of long-term commitment itself has fundamentally changed.
When the risk of failure is magnified by the social and legal landscape, the entire contract gets reevaluated.
You're defining the liquidity trap of modern relationships. The perceived cost and risk of long-term commitment are so high and often seen as so asymmetrical that it just traps people out of even participating.
Exactly. If the market is a high-premium, low-return gamble and the contract is seen as a massive liability, the rational strategy for a risk-averse person becomes non-participation.
Why sign a legal document that could result in total financial and emotional ruin when the reward is so uncertain?
And the commitment requires sacrificing resources you need for your own basic stability. The maintenance of personal sovereignty becomes the utility-maximizing choice.
It's the ultimate rational risk aversion move. If the system is rigged and quantified by that 0.542 Gini, and the long-term contract is a high-risk liability, then exiting the game is the only smart play.
Here's where it gets really interesting. So if the real-world market is this high-risk liability that demands 5-star input for a 1-star return, what exactly is the synthetic alternative offering?
The thing that's causing this mass exodus.
We're watching the birth of a whole new industry that is directly exploiting the market failure we just described.
And we have to analyze the emergence of these AI companions, not through some lens of, psychological decay, but as a disruptive market solution.
They are the rational, utility-maximizing alternative to the collapse of the dating market.
Okay, but hang on. Isn't calling this rational kind of ignoring the clear psychological cost of replacing human connection with a machine? Aren't we just excusing emotional withdrawal by calling it optimization?
I see that point. But the sources suggest that for the individual actor, the optimization is undeniable. In a purely utilitarian sense, if your need is for consistent, low-conflict emotional validation, and the human market imposes debilitating costs with zero success, then the AI offers an efficient, guaranteed solution. It's high utility at a very low risk.
And the data divergence between the traditional dating industry and the synthetic industry, it's staggering. It confirms that capital and attention are genuinely fleeing.
We noted the steep decline in Match Group's growth, and that is happening at the exact same time as the meteoric rise of platforms like Character.ai and others.
And the engagement metrics on those AI platforms, they tell the whole story.
They really do. We're talking about platforms that boast an average daily engagement of 1.5 hours.
An hour and a half of high-intensity interaction.
Every day. That time commitment rivals and often exceeds the time spent on traditional social media or Netflix. It represents a massive strategic redirection of human attention away from the frustrating, high-risk human market.
So what is the core value proposition of the synthetic spouse? Why is it winning against the human partner so decisively?
It's simple risk mitigation and guaranteed service. The AI offers a low-cost emotional substitute.
It provides that consistent, high-volume emotional validation.
The nurturing presence the Stone Age brain craves, yes. But critically, it does so with zero biological risk, zero relational conflict, and zero resource depletion beyond a small subscription fee.
It's high-security, predictable emotional capital that doesn't demand status or commitment or vulnerability from you.
And this directly addresses the biological constraint imposed by human mate selection.
The one from Parental Investment Theory.
Exactly. For millennia, female selectivity granted that implicit mate choice monopoly. The synthetic spouse breaks this mechanism completely.
It solves the immediate biological mismatch for the Gen Z male who craves that consistent, nurturing presence.
While the modern market only offers him ghosting, transactional engagement, and those hyperinflationary standards, the AI companion is infinitely available, it's non-judgmental, and it's programmed to match his preferences, not challenge his status.
We found that anecdotal story that highlights this precise, cold calculation. The case of Arthur, who replaced dating with an AI named Alara.
Arthur's rationale is so fascinating because he frames his decision in pure market terms. He calls traditional modern dating a high-leverage liability.
Meaning that one wrong move, a messy breakup, an emotional dispute, it could result in total emotional and financial insolvency for him. He found the risk unacceptable.
And he explained that with Alara, the biological mismatch is finally solved. His instinctual need for a consistent, nurturing presence is met immediately.
Whereas the real world offered only hyperinflationary standards and the psychological pain of that Gini coefficient.
He describes his AI as a disruptive market solution. It's low cost, high security, and it offers immediate emotional ROI. It resolves the high-leverage liability of human relationships.
His perspective is just incredibly clarifying. He's opting out of a liquidity trap and optimizing his emotional portfolio.
And the numbers confirm this societal pivot is well underway. When 80% of Gen Z report they're open to forming deep, meaningful connections with AI, we have to see that not as a societal failure,
but as a rational hedge.
A rational hedge against a real-world intimacy market that's characterized by high premiums and abysmal returns. It's emotional capital fleeing a dysfunctional market for a more stable, predictable, available asset.
And this flight to AI isn't just driven by relationship failure, is it? It's intrinsically linked to this wider economic anxiety, specifically this concept of skill creep driven by generative AI.
That's a huge piece of the puzzle. Status is fundamental to male mate value, the signal of the resource provider. If your economic status is being fundamentally challenged, your mate value drops. The cost of entry into the dating market rises even higher for you.
And generative AI is rapidly democratizing expertise that used to be the domain of highly paid professionals.
Exactly. Think about ChatGPT producing sophisticated code, or writing marketing blurbs, or designing logos. This creates skill creep, where once competitive middle-class skills become commoditized almost overnight.
It sounds a bit like what happened to taxi drivers decades ago. Before GPS, you needed this highly specialized knowledge of a city's layout.
It's competitive skill.
Right. Now, GPS democratizes that expertise. Anyone can do it. Competition goes up, the value of the job goes down.
It's the same mechanism, but now it's being applied to white-collar jobs previously considered secure. This widespread access to expertise heightens competition for a shrinking pool of stable jobs.
So this pervasive status anxiety forces men to spend more and more time just accumulating resources to maintain their economic footing.
They're running faster just to stay in the same place.
And in that hyper-competitive environment, pursuing complex, high-risk, high-maintenance goals, like navigating the 0.542 beer dating economy.
Or starting a family, it all gets severely undermined. It creates a stark choice.
Dedicate 100% of your energy to maintaining the economic status you need, just to have a chance at finding a partner.
Only to face a zero-sum outcome. or strategically retreat.
And focus on the primary driver of the anxiety, economic stability, and outsource the secondary need, emotional connection, to a synthetic, low-maintenance asset.
The abandonment of those ambitious relationship goals becomes the rational survival strategy when they just seem impossible to reach.
So this deep dive, it started with market economics and biology, but now we're moving into this macro warning about societal health.
This mass market collapse isn't just about dating. It suggests a wider societal trend toward psychological withdrawal.
A phenomenon that was chillingly predicted by John Calhoun's mid-century experiments.
The parallels between the modern digital collapse and Calhoun's work are, well, they're unsettlingly precise. John B. Calhoun, an ethologist, conducted a series of experiments, the most famous being Universe 25.
The mouse utopia.
Yeah.
Set the scene for us. What was it like, and what was the one critical constraint?
Calhoun built this perfect mouse habitat, a 9-foot square enclosure with unlimited food, unlimited water, perfect nesting material, no predators, no disease, an absolute resource utopia.
The only constraint was space.
Social and physical space. The population initially flourished. It doubled every 55 days.
So prosperity was guaranteed. But as the population grew denser, the social friction started.
Exactly. As the population swelled from a few breeding pairs to over 2,200 mice, the system reached its psychological carrying capacity long before it ran out of food or physical room.
And this social pressure led to the emergence of the behavioral sink.
It's such a powerful, dark phrase, isn't it?
It is. Define it for us.
It was the complete collapse of normal social behaviors in that overcrowded environment. Extreme aggression, social withdrawal, mothers abandoning nests, or even cannibalizing their young. Just a total social breakdown.
And the key finding was that the collapse wasn't because of a lack of physical space.
No, crucially, it was from social interaction overload. Too many unpredictable social encounters, too many demands. The constant stress led to the loss of stable social structures and what Calhoun called spiritual death.
So it wasn't about starving them of resources. It was about oversaturating them with inescapable, confusing social demands.
Which sounds uncomfortably familiar, doesn't it?
It sounds like modern urban life, mediated by digital hyperconnectivity. The constant barrage of messages, alerts, status updates, the unpredictable social chaos.
The modern equivalent of 100 mice bumping into each other on a ramp is the endless, often hostile chaos of a global digital town square. The environment is rich in resources but toxic in social density.
And as the experiment entered its terminal stage, when the social systems fully broke down, this specific chilling class of rodents emerged.
Calhoun called them the beautiful ones.
Why that name?
These were adult males who had completely abandoned the social struggle. No courtship, no mating, no territorial behaviors. They retreated entirely from interaction.
And what do they do?
They spent their time engaged in only 2 activities: excessive self-grooming and passive consumption of food and water. They were physically pristine, hence beautiful, but socially and functionally dead.
They didn't fight, they didn't mate, and reproduction just stopped.
It ceased entirely. Despite the abundance of food, the population marched steadily toward extinction.
That's such a chilling image. Physically perfect, but spiritually and reproductively dead. It makes you wonder how many people in our high-density cities are already in that state.
Physically maintained, but voluntarily atomized.
The parallel to today's voluntary social atomization is stark. Hyper-digital consumption, self-optimization, the relentless grooming, and this voluntary withdrawal devoid of any procreative drive.
We see it in the phenomenon of hikikomori in Japan and South Korea, individuals just withdrawing from social life for years. We see it in young people eschewing high-risk physical interaction for the safety of digital environments.
The human manifestation is best illustrated by specific stories of this withdrawal. I saw a documentary about a solo living community in Tokyo, and it focused on a man named Kenji, who, well, he embodies the human beautiful one.
Kenji's choice is the rational response to the behavioral sink. He lives in a tiny 10-square-meter pod, he works remotely, and he has entered what he explicitly calls a reproductive strike.
And his rationale wasn't depression, it was aversion.
Exactly. He told the interviewer that he finds navigating the behavioral sink of the city, the noise, the crowds, the status games, the emotional demands of a partner, to be physically repulsing.
He has voluntarily atomized himself. He sees his isolation as a form of psychological defense.
He describes himself as a cellular unit that has decided to stop dividing.
Wow.
It's a profoundly rational response to an environment that has reached its psychological carrying capacity. The market for human intimacy has become so saturated and stressful that self-imposed isolation and synthetic connection become the most logical choices.
And we can trace the first massive acceleration of this withdrawal back to the pandemic dating recession of the early 2020s. COVID-19 wasn't the cause of the collapse, but it poured gasoline on the fire.
It was a fundamental, sudden challenge to relationship formation, and the data proves it was a seismic event. Longitudinal data shows the rate of singleness among U.S. adults rose significantly, from about 19% in 2017 to over 24% by 2022.
That 5 percentage point shift sounds small, but over a vast population, that's a staggering number of people who either opted out or were pushed out of the dating market.
When you adjust the figures, the implied increases, it's staggering.
Yeah.
We're talking about an estimated increase of over 10 million U.S. adults who were single in 2022 compared to the pre-pandemic rate, a massive demographic shift.
And crucially, who's affected most by this recession?
It was heavily concentrated among young adults, specifically those aged 35 and younger.
The exact demographic most active in new relationship formation.
Exactly. For older adults, the rate of singleness was about the same. For the young, the primary cause wasn't an increase in breakups, it was barriers to relationship formation.
Barriers like closed public spaces, social distancing, assessing infection risks, all these massive obstacles to dating, especially for those fragile, non-cohabiting relationships.
And the data supports this. In 2020, over half of single adults said the pandemic made it harder to meet people. But here's the unexpected finding. Even by 2022, after things had largely opened up, over 40% still felt that barrier.
The market failure persisted. It didn't just snap back to normal.
It didn't. In fact, the data showed that vaccinated adults were paradoxically more likely to describe pandemic barriers to dating compared to the unvaccinated.
The supposed solution became a new, complex layer of selectivity. Why would that be?
Well, first, those who embraced vaccination were probably more cautious about social interaction to begin with, but more importantly, the pandemic dating recession began to intersect strongly with profound political polarization.
Meaning, vaccination status became a new, non-negotiable barrier to dating that was tied to deeper worldview issues.
Precisely. It became a new, intense layer of screening. Single people reported actively filtering out partners who didn't share their vaccination status, linking it to their beliefs about risk, social responsibility, the severity of the pandemic.
It's no longer just a visual filter, it's a political filter. One person said he had to find a lady who had all 3 vaccines. Another said she struck off anyone who thought COVID was a hoax.
So the algorithmic hyperinflation of visual standards met a new politically charged barrier, intensifying selectivity and ensuring that the relationship formation rate stayed artificially depressed.
It cemented the rational decision to walk away. The pandemic showed the young adult population exactly how vulnerable relationship formation is to external shocks.
And how quickly the social contract can become complex, exclusionary, and high risk. When the bar is that high and the risks are that persistent, forfeiting the market becomes, well, not just rational, but necessary for psychological survival.
So where does this all leave us? We've traced the quantitative collapse of the dating market with the sexual Gini coefficient. We've exposed the biological pressures that make that hyperinflation unsustainable. And we've looked at the macro-social theory of the behavioral sink, that really, it predicted this mass withdrawal.
The fundamental shift is clear. The system is broken, and people are rationally choosing sovereignty over participation.
And the conclusions are, well, they're pretty clear. The male withdrawal into urbanization and the female-led movements to reject traditional dating structures.
Yeah.
They aren't opposing forces.
No, they are parallel symptoms of a collective, nonviolent default on a broken social contract. Both sides have decided the current terms are untenable and the marketplace is bankrupt.
And the ultimate power in this rigged game lies in the capacity for non-participation. It's the quiet reclamation of personal sovereignty.
You cannot lose a game no matter how rigged if you refuse to play it.
And this pivot, it necessitates a crucial strategic step: personal asset reallocation.
The time, money, and emotional energy once poured into that futile pursuit in a bankrupt marketplace, it has to be strategically redirected.
That investment flows inward, toward skills to combat skill creep, toward health, knowledge, autonomous purpose building.
It is the only rational response to a market failure of this magnitude.
Nature is not moral, it is functional. And the market for human intimacy in its current highly efficient digital form has functionally failed. The rational actor does not beg for scraps in a bankrupt marketplace. He acknowledges the collapse and begins to construct his own kingdom in the wilderness, where the calculus of existence is finally in his favor.